It's Saturday morning.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ed Collab Gathering, a free day of PD in your PJs. This is workshop number 1, and if you're here, you are in for a treat. We have an amazing group ready to talk to you today. I'm here with poets Janet Wong, Amy Ludwig Vanderwater, and Alan Katz, and also educators Tim Dooley and the Ed Collab book ambassador Joellen McCarthy. So Joellen, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. Of course, it's April 2nd, but we should be celebrating poetry all year long. And my very established, wonderful authors and educator friends who have been sharing this message forever and ever are here to really add to that conversation and help spread a love and joy of poetry. So I thought maybe we could get started by sharing a book as someone who is very nerdy and likes to read books. And if I was mentioning earlier that my bookshelf is under construction right now, so I have books all over my table, and many of these authors, I just tweeted out a Padlet, their resources are on there as well. So we're going to talk about great ideas and resources and start with a read aloud. This is a new favorite book. It's called Daniel Finds a Poem by Misha Archer, and I know copyright Chris would have a fit if I read the whole thing, so I just want to share with you one of the reasons that we all agree we love this book and thought it was a great start. It reminds us very much of Mem Fox's Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge when he goes out and seeks the question or the answer to the question, what is a memory? And in this poetry book, this young child walks through the park on the day of a poetry reading, and he asks all of the animals in the park, what does poetry mean to you? So he gets different answers and different responses, and it really illustrates the possibilities with poetry, how poetry can be so many things. And I thought I'd like to ask, as we go through and we think about today, what does poetry mean to some of our guests, authors, and educators? So how about, Alan, if we start with you, what is poetry to you?
Well, thank you. I tried to be pithy and come up with an answer to something like that, and I can't. I just have nothing. No, I do. The thought that you can take ordinary words and rearrange them and combine them in extraordinary ways, in extraordinary powerful ways, I think that's poetry. And because I like to be funny, I'm going to fix that to add, take unfunny words and combine them in hilarious ways. So I think the other experts and guest panelists today probably know a lot more than I do, but that's what it is to me.
Well, we're all here to learn. So exciting. How about Amy?
Well, I'm taking words from somebody else. Carl Sandburg once wrote, poetry is the synthesis of hyacinths and biscuits. And I love how that sounds. And I also love the idea of biscuits are such a daily need, food, bread, and hyacinths are a little bit of magic. So for me, poetry is really the dailiness, the needs we have, combined with just a little hint of magic, just that little scent of glory that makes life better.
Love that. How about Janet?
Well, I'm going to take a very practical approach. For me, today, teachers don't have enough time to teach what they want to teach, and poetry is a way to take what you're passionate about sharing and share it in 30 seconds. A poem is short. If your passion happens to be hyacinths or biscuits, you can find a poem about it, and it'll only take you 30 seconds to share who you really are and what's really important to you with your students.
Thank you. How about Kim?
Well, I think poetry is, for me and for teaching kids, it's having a way to have a conversation with your heart. And I think whether you're reading a poem or whether you're writing a poem, you're kind of having that conversation with yourself. And for kids, I think having a conversation with yourself is really helping them get to know themselves and who they are and what's important to them.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm really excited about the fact that we can have this conversation and be so interactive, learning from each other and learning from the resources as well as just your experiences. So I'm excited to learn from all of you today. I know that we have people who are following along at home on Twitter, and we have a hashtag which is the Ed Collab Gathering. If you put 1 at the end of that hashtag, that will tweet directly to us and to our wonderful facilitator Lauren. So if you have questions or thoughts or comments, it would be really helpful to use that hashtag so that you could really be part of this conversation, and we encourage that. So I love all of the things that you said, and I was frantically trying to tweet as everyone was talking. You know, Alan saying taking the ordinary to extraordinary, Amy putting her little bit of magic into poetry. I love the fact that Kim and Janet both mentioned passions and love, because we cannot talk about those things. You know, with that, I mean, we can't talk about poetry or any kind of writing or anything in life without expressing the connection to our hearts. So poetry is definitely a way to reach hearts and minds of our students. So let's get started. Janet, I know when we talked earlier, we talked a lot about poetry and passions and connections, and we did look at, you know, Daniel finds a poem as a way to think about what poetry is, because it's really possibilities. The poetry is the possibilities in finding a vision for kids and looking. I love that you brought up the fact that, you know, it's short and sweet, and I'm going to show. I have a copy here in my hand from the Poetry Friday collection, and I know that one of the things, Janet and Sylvia, you have done so well, is maybe you can talk a little bit about your Poetry Friday anthology collections.
Okay, sure, absolutely. Thank you for holding it up. The Poetry Friday Anthology for Celebrants was the one I think that you held up, which has 156 poems about all kinds of celebrations, from National Engineers Week to Cookie Day. The slide that's up, I have to tell you about this one. So I was having dinner with a bunch of people, including Georgella Lyon, who is Poet Laureate of the state of Kentucky now. And I told Georgella that for me, one of the things that I'm really focusing on right now is pushing poetry and different content areas. So I hear too many teachers say, I don't have time for poetry. And what I want to say is, well, you know what? I have a 30-second math poem. Do you have 30 seconds to spend teaching math? I have a 30-second geography poem. Do you have 30 seconds to teach geography? And so I think that that's really one great way to bring poetry into every single day, not just April, not just the poetry unit. But so I was sitting across from Georgella Lyon, and I said to her, you know, this is just like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And she said, Janet, that is so violent. And she said, could we call it hatching 2 birds from the same egg? And I said, perfect. I love it. Hatching 2 birds from the same egg. So think of poetry across the curriculum as hatching 2 birds from the same egg. And then here on this slide, I list just some favorites for crossing the curriculum. So the Poetry Friday Anthology for Celebrations, Forest Has a Song by Amy Ludwig Vanderwater. Poetry and Science, which is our pretty new, just came out in December. Pretty new student edition that goes to the Poetry Friday Anthology for Science, the teacher edition. Silver People, about the building of the Panama Canal by Margarita Engel. The National Geographic book on nature poetry, 200 poems on all different kinds of nature topics, including a lot of science-related, science-focused topics, put together by J. Patrick Lewis. Twist yoga poems. If you want to do yoga during PE, you could use one of my poems from that book. The Tree That Time Built, an excellent science anthology by Marianne Hoberman. When the Sun Shines on Antarctica by Irene Latham. Brilliant pairing of poetry and nonfiction prose pieces with science nuggets. And Voices from the March on Washington by Georgella Lyon and J. Patrick Lewis. So those are just some of my favorites for poetry across the curriculum. I think, Kim, you were saying you had some favorites too, right?
Well, of course, I pulled up yours, Janet. I thought everybody.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. This is really how I got started when I moved to a new grade level. I read over the summer your book, and it got me really excited about moving into a new grade level. And that is how I discovered the Poem Farm and Amy was through your book. So I think anyone that's looking for a great resource to start using poetry, I would totally recommend this. Another one that I've used just to get kids started looking closely and writing a little more deeply about what they see and kind of looking at things outside with new eyes is Helen Frost's book, Step Gently Out. And spring is a perfect time to take a poetry walk and have kids kind of just take notes about what they see outside and come back in and write. So these are a couple that I would recommend to get kids started.
I love that. I think that just all of the resources to be able to have a mentor text to bring into the classroom, right? You know, teaching doesn't have to be lonely, as Katie Wood-Ray says, when we have these wonderful books. And you guys have given us such great resources. I know in looking at some of Alan Katz's poetry, it leaves kids laughing out loud. And in working with you know, other authors and teachers, and in my work, it's important to find something that will tap into the interest and, as Janet said, the passions. And for some of our students, that humor, that approach through humor is really a great entry point for our kids. So kind of giving them the bridge to see, you know, going from Michelle Silverstein and Alan Katz, and then building on their understanding about the beautiful language and the possibilities, whether we're going across the curriculum and hatching two birds, right, as Janet said. I think that, you know, those possibilities are endless. And one of the things that I just wanted to add to, because as a staff developer working in the classrooms with teachers and students every day, you know, each of the authors that are here have great resources on their website. But the Poem Farm and the Poetry Friday anthology that both, you know, Amy and Janet have really contributed to a tremendous resource for educators and for students. One of the things that I wanted to mention, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, is in the Poetry Friday anthology for celebrations, it's bilingual texts. So you can also see the poems in English and in Spanish, and I think that that is, you know, a fabulous resource and opportunity for many, many students with English as a second language, and just being able to see and celebrate, you know, that opportunity for language in many different cultures too. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And Joellen, if I may, this isn't known really well, but My New Everyday Birds also has a bilingual edition, which is, I guess, only available through Scholastic, the book club. So it's a book that I wrote, but I don't know how to read. So I'm looking forward.
But Amy, you can read it. You know, one of the best workshops that I've done for parents was one where I was told just 1 week before the workshop that more than 50% of the parents spoke only Spanish. And I said, oh, great. Okay, this is going to be interesting. But then, since I had a week, I had someone translate my talk into Spanish. And I read the first paragraph of my speech in Spanish, and then later on just sprinkled in a few lines here and there. And the great thing is it's phonetic. So even though you'll have a terrible accent, you can read it. And those kids in your school audience who hear you read it in Spanish, those kids who have Spanish spoken at home, are going to feel so honored that you're making the effort.
Oh,
so make the effort.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Aw, I love that. See, there's so much love going around. We need our little Google effects, Amy, with our hearts above our heads.
Well, Joellen, I have to say that mentioning my name and Shel Silverstein's in the same breath is just overwhelmingly complimentary, and to him, of course. But no, that's
Alan,
just so nice of you. Thank you.
I heard when Joellen did that too, it popped. I could see Shel Silverstein and Alan Katz, and I thought, you know, we're going to have to just put that into our vocabulary. Whenever we talk about Shel Silverstein, we're just going to have to add and Alan Katz.
Well, if you could just do it in the other order, I'd appreciate it. Wouldn't cost nothing. But thank you for that. That was very kind.
Well, I think it's great, and as I mentioned, I think, I mean, all of you are wonderful resources, and I'm sure the people in the audience are familiar already with many of your books, but maybe you can talk a little bit about your poetry, like from the oops, or as Janet suggested, maybe you could bust out into a song for us during our
Well,
conversation
that's
today.
not going to be good for anybody. But, well, thank you. I came to poetry pretty late in life, and it was actually after doing the songbooks, like Take Me Out of the Bathtub, that the wonderful folks at Simon & Schuster said, how about trying poetry? And I said, I think you should get someone else because I don't really know how to do that. My wife is a wonderful poet, but I had never really spent time with poetry, I'm sad to say. And I tried it, and I loved it. And that's now my favorite. I think it's my favorite form of writing. And I learned something. If somebody says try something new, you don't say, no, I don't like that. And I talk about that in schools, that kids say, I don't like that kind of music or that kind of writing or that kind of artwork or food or sport or anything. Don't say no, because you might find out you love it. And Oops has 100 poems in the book, as well as poems I wrote when no one was looking has 100 poems, both illustrated by Ed Koren. And I think my favorite poem in the book is a poem that after my wife, who is a very gifted and serious poet, my wife Rose saw the poem, she handed it back to me and said, are they seriously paying you for that? Unfortunately, because it's called The Lollipop, and I'll just share this very quickly. It says, lick, 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 stick. After all those licks, all you have left is the stick. When kids hear that, they say, wait a minute, I can write that, and that's the point. We can all share words. Of course, not all poems are funny and not all poems rhyme, but having fun with language and having fun with words is the message of poetry to me.
I love that. I love that you just said about having fun with words, because that's what it's about. It's about having fun, playing with words. And, in Writing Workshop, our notebooks are playgrounds for writing, as Jeff Anderson says. And I think, to have that possibility with poetry is just endless. So thank you for saying that, Alan.
Well, thank you. One more thing, if I may. When I start talking about poetry in my school visits, I show the first line of the first poem in Oops, and it starts out, the wind is blowing quite a breeze. And I share that because I wrote it down because the wind was blowing quite a breeze. I said I could always erase it or change it or revise it. And I take hands from the audience. I say, okay, I need a second line for that poem. And it doesn't have to rhyme with breeze. It can be anything. And, I say the wind is blowing quite a breeze. The wind is blowing on my knees. The wind is blowing at spring dance. It tells me I forgot my pants. But when I say the wind is blowing quite a breeze, someone will raise her hand and say, the second line could be, the wind is blowing quite a breeze. It's so cold that I might freeze. Someone else might say, the wind is blowing quite a breeze. I'd really like a piece of cheese. And by the time we go around the room, we've got 6 or 8 different poems working. And that's what I love, too. We all start in the same place, and we go off in different directions based on what we know, what we're interested in, our sensibility. So that's poetry, too.
I have to tell you, you can't see me right now because Alan was talking, but as you were talking, I was swooning over here because I think that is, the heart of all good teaching, right? When we recognize that we start at a place, an entry point, meet our kids where they are and bring them to where they need to be, and that's on their own journey, on their own path, and it's going to look different for every child. So I was literally swooning as you were saying that, and I was wishing I had the Google effects of the hearts going over my head.
So in the first 18 minutes, you've compared me to Shel Silverstein, and I made you swoon. I'm done. Everybody else. I got enough. Thank you. That's very nice of you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So I know right now Amy and Janet also are doing a lot of work with science and poetry, both in the anthology, and I know Amy's poetry is some of the selections that are in there. But maybe you could both talk a little bit about that, as well as one thing that Amy just started this month in celebration of poetry, which is adding the layer of wonder to poetry. So would you guys mind sharing some of that?
Oh, I'd be happy to. Amy, do you want to go first, and then I'll follow you?
Sure. This first of all, it has been an honor and a ton of fun to be a part of Janet and Sylvia's various Poetry Friday anthologies. The Poetry of Science is a blast. I'll let Janet talk to you about that. This month is National Poetry Month, and every National Poetry Month I take on a little project at the Poem Farm. And this month I'm finding all my inspiration at Wonderopolis. So if any of you who are with us today are not familiar with wonderopolis.org, this is a website that offers students, adults, anybody, an article, something new to think about. It could be science, it could be history, it could be psychology, but something new to think about every day with an article and a video and all kinds of information. So each day of this month, I'm reading the previous day's wonder at Wonderopolis and then writing a poem at the Poem Farm based on something I think of from the previous day's wonder at Wonderopolis. So if it's okay, Joellen, I'll read today's. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
All right. Well, I almost was late to this Google Hangout because I was trying to get this right up on my website. Yesterday's Wonderopolis wonder was, is the grass always greener on the other side? And it was all about people wishing that they had what other people had, and I got thinking and fell asleep in front of the heater with my notebook late last night around 1 a.m. Writing about thankful journals and how some people keep gratitude journals as a way to not think that the grass is greener on the other side. So today's poem, number 2 in this year's Wallow in Wonder series, is called Thankful Journal. I keep a thankful journal, and in this book I write 3 things I am thankful for every single night. It doesn't take me long at all. All day long I look for new things to be thankful for, to list in my small book. If I let you read it, you would know some things I like. My grandma, stars, Orion's best, big waterfalls, my bike, how our kitty snuggles me, the reading branch in my old tree. On days I feel my life is bad and other grass seems greener, on days I feel my heart grow cold, on days my voice gets meaner, I read. I read any page from January straight through to December. I read my thankful journal. It helps me to remember my life is good.
Oh,
Wonderful, Nate.
wow.
Wonderful.
So Wonderopolis is great, and one of the things that I think is important for students to know is that people, those of us who write regularly, do not often find ourselves instantly inspired. It's important to sometimes force yourself to become inspired and just say, today I will be inspired by an article I read at Wonderopolis, or a page I find in a book, or something outside my window. Inspiration is something we decide to be, not something that just happens magically.
Oh,
Very nice.
Love it.
I love that.
Yeah. Somebody needs to tweet that, all right?
I'm trying to tweet and listen at the same time, and that was a hard one because.
So, Amy, say it again. We're going to tweet it later. What?
I'll jot it down as you speak, Janet. I'll turn it over to
I
you.
got it. Inspiration.
I've got it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Janet.
All right. All right. I'm going to go. So I actually am going to go with I'm going to read a poem by Amy Ludwig Vanderwater from the Poetry of Science, and it's called How to Be a Scientist. And it starts with the word wonder, which I thought was a good segue. How to Be a Scientist by Amy Ludwig Vanderwater. Wonder, ask, hypothesize, experiment, open your eyes, watch, now write. What do you see? Share everything you learn with me. So that's by Amy. I have some big news. You see on the slide, you see the sun cover for the Poetry Friday Anthology for Science, the teacher edition. Well, if you can see, this is the new cover for the teacher librarian edition. It just came out yesterday, so it's brand new. We did it so that it would match the student edition cover. So if you start seeing this one around, now you know you saw it here first.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and for me, the thing about science, why science and science poetry has become such a big deal for me, is I started reading all those articles full of statistics about how something like 30% of third grade girls decide already in third grade that science is not for them. They're done with science by third grade. How can that be? When you look at the way our society is moving, I'm not saying they all have to be scientists and engineers when they grow up, but I want them to have the option. And if they decided in third grade that science was not for them, they're not going to have the option when they get to college. to pursue a STEM career. So Walter Dean Myers, in the New York Times article that he wrote shortly before his death, the one about multicultural books, has a paragraph in that New York Times essay about how when he was working in the HR department of a chemical engineering firm, they needed a new chemist, and they found two prospects that they wanted to send to the to the department, and one of them was a black chemist, and Walter Dean Myers' boss said, "Oh, that guy is no chemist." And on paper, his credentials were just as good as, if not better than, the second candidate. And Walter Dean Myers said in his article, he said, "This was not a case of simple racism. What it was is that my boss had never seen a black chemist." And so when we talk about the need for more diverse books, I think we also need to talk about the need for certain kinds of diversity. And one of those kinds of diversity would be books of poems or stories or whatever that show people as scientists and engineers that are Latino, that are black, that are women and girls. Janine Atkins has a book coming out next year called Finding Wonders, about 3 girl scientists. That's the unpublished book that I'm most excited to see.
I love we're getting previews. This is wonderful. This is so exciting. And I think it's important too that you were talking about the possibilities and expanding that through reaching all students, because that's just good pedagogy and that's important in all that we do. And I think it's a perfect opportunity to talk about how we can look to really celebrate poetry in our classrooms, because I know Kim has done a lot of work, especially specifically talking about having author visits. And I feel like when you mentioned that earlier about Janet saying, that some people feel, oh, scientists, if girls don't feel that they are into that they're done, and which is such a fixed mindset. And I think there are people who view poetry as, oh, you either love it or you hate it, or well, I'll deal with poetry in April. And so I think that's why this conversation is so valuable, because it's not only something that's a necessity, but it's also something that will enhance our curriculum and our teaching and our writing instruction. So I'm thrilled about that. And maybe, Kim, you can share a little bit with us in your work as well.
Sure. The slide I think everyone can see right now is a picture of Amy Ludwig Vanderwater visiting our school last year. And I've written a number of grants to bring in specifically poets, and we also had Melissa Stewart this year as well, to come in and write with kids. And the kind of visit where they actually come into classrooms and write with kids. And the kids feel like they know these people. They feel like they are their friends. And the visits inspire writing that continues on and on and on. And I've heard kids this year who visited with Amy last year who will say, well, I'm going to rewrite this section with line breaks like I learned from Amy last year. The visits are lasting, and I think for any grade level, the kids are comfortable with poetry helps them to approach writing during writing workshop. One of the things that I love to do is to start writing workshop out with a poem. To work on revision work with a poem is, it's just much easier for some of the struggling writers to approach a little bit of work on a poem that would teach the same sort of skill that they would need on a bigger piece that they are doing. So Amy came. Amy worked in all of our classrooms. This year, Laura Purdy Salas came and worked in all of our classrooms. And the kids are already talking about who should we invite next year. The third graders needed to write a persuasive speech this year at the beginning of our opinion writing unit. And they decided to ask our principal for more poetry books in our classrooms. And one of their support reasons was so that we can decide which poet we should invite next year. So It's been a great thing for our school. It really has helped build school community, and something common that we can all enjoy and meet together, and that it can continue year after year, grade level to grade level. It's been great. One of the sources that I've used is our school's foundation to write grants. Our PTO has also been very supportive, and I was trying to think of a little bit of advice for anyone that is wanting to write a grant, in particular for bringing in a poet or an author. I have had very good success with telling a story when I write my grant, not just asking for the amount of money that I need and telling who the person is, but maybe telling a little story about work with poetry in a classroom, or work with a student, or student in poetry. I've had very good luck with that. So that'd be my advice there.
I love that, because I think it's important, as you were saying, that you are bringing in authors, and so you're actually doing that, which is so powerful, because we want our students to view authors as rock stars. I think that's so, and I think it's so powerful, and it really impacts kids. And I loved hearing you say how your kids are now thinking about next year. But I'm also sitting here in awe, thinking what a wonderful opportunity that you had Melissa Stewart come in, and Amy, and to be able to have such nonfiction joy and poetry at the same time is wonderful. So I know we have some examples also with your students, because we were talking behind the scenes about things and other ways to celebrate, like Poetry Cafe and Poetry Word Blanket. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that for us?
Sure. This is my absolute favorite poem, if I had to pick one, by Amy. This is from the Poem Farm. This is her poem called Poem Blanket. And prior to her visit, each of the students picked a word that would be one of their words that they would put in a word blanket if they were creating their own word blanket. And many of the older students wrote word blanket poems, but this was it's actually still hanging in the school, Amy. We walked by it, and your spirit is still there. This was in the hallway to welcome Amy when she came to our school. And what's fun is we can go down, we can pick out words to use in a poem, we can go down and be inspired. It's been just a wonderful piece to have there. And in the center was a tree that one of the parents was inspired to create. Reminded us of the cover of the Poem Farm. So that was just one thing that we did on a visit. When Melissa Stewart was here, I put together a group of students, wetlands writers, that went. We visited a wetlands area nearby, and the kids wrote some poetry, actually with Melissa as well, and we were inspired that way. I think this next slide is a video clip of a poetry club that I started at our school, and should I go ahead with that?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, Lauren. I think could have us all set up.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we wished that we could have had some of the poetry club members at school today, but it's the first day of our spring break, and the kids were not going to be available. So my good friend came and videotaped one of our meetings at lunchtime. Poetry club meets once a week, Mondays at lunchtime. The kids bring their lunch, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Any of the kids that are poetry lovers and are looking for a space to write, a time to write, they come to my room at lunchtime and they write. This particular video was taken on pajama day. We don't always wear our pajamas to school, so you'll see lots of cute pajamas there. The kids come, they have writer's notebooks, they treasure, and these are kids that are looking to share with other kids. They write. We try to leave time at the end for kids who want to share. And they're very proud. They're proud of their work. They're proud of the club. Currently, because of National Poetry Month, they are writing a progressive poem where each day during the month that we're at school, they take and write a line. And we did pick a particular theme. Last year they picked poetry. This year they picked dreams. And so we will post that once we have that poem finished. But sometimes the kids will come and I'll just, we'll go to the poem farm. We'll look at what's new on the poem farm. Or we'll go to Laura Purdy Salas's site and we'll do some writing with one of her 15 words or less poems as a warm-up. Sometimes we'll go to No Water River and we'll watch a video of a poet. I love that resource. The kids feel, once again, like they know the poets when they watch those. Oftentimes I will hold up new books that poets have published. We'll start out with a couple of poems, and sometimes those poems will get somebody started writing a poem. Oftentimes these kids have their own ideas, and this is a space I think you'll see in the video where they feel comfortable. They know they can write about whatever they want to write about. And it's so funny. Sometimes they'll come up to me and they'll say, Mrs. Dooley, can I write about this today? And I'll look at them and I'll say, this is Poetry Club. This is your choice. You guys, you get to write whatever you want to write. And they do. So I think we can go ahead and watch some of the video if Laura's ready to start that.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing students into our day today. That's so important because all we're doing is we're doing this all for students, right?
Right.
I think we're queuing up. Here we go.
While we're waiting for that video clip, oh, here it is. Okay. You know, Kim Dooley, I wonder if you can post a link to this on Twitter so that we can watch it, because I'm having some problems hearing it.
Sure, we can post a link on Twitter.
I can do that.
Oh, I have a friend who just did it, sitting right here. It's already posted.
Wow.
We're good.
And
Great.
Okay.
Great. So people could have an opportunity to see that after, I guess. That would be great. Sorry about that technical difficulty.
And Joellen, can you add it to the Padlet as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I did put a link into the blog post that Kim wrote about visiting, but I'll add that to the Padlet. Great suggestion. Thank you, Amy. If anybody wants to add, go ahead, please.
Okay, Kim, since your poetry club meets at lunch on Poem in Your Pocket Day, or for Poem in Your Pocket Day, which is April 21st this year, I think you need to share my poem, Pocket Poems card. Do you know this poem?
Perfect. I do not, but we will be
Okay,
celebrating. That's perfect. We will do that.
it's in this book. Well, the reason you need to do it is because your club is at lunch, because the poem goes like this. Pocket Poems card. Memorizing isn't hard. Take a card out when you eat. Read out loud again. Repeat. Read. Bite. Read.
Oh, that's perfect. We will for sure do that.
Okay, good.
I love that. I'm gonna send that out to everybody as well, so people can see that. Thank you, Janet.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you guys want, we figured out the issue why we can't hear the video. Would you like me to go back and play it? That we can get it working now if we have a couple minutes, or would you rather just stick with the tweeted out link?
Maybe we can stick with the link because I feel like we probably only have a few more minutes, and I want to be able to get to some of the other resources to share from Poem Farm. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So we were talking about having, again, poetry possibilities, and so many of the resources that we talked about, we also wanted to share some things like Charles Smith Jr.'s poetry, where he does a lot of poetry and playing with the visual representation of imagery and poetry, and I think that's an important connection, and I know that the slide that is up, if you are looking at it for a brief moment, also has a student that I work with working with some nonfiction resources where, whether we're talking about free verse poetry or concrete poetry or poetry in any form, you can't write about something unless you know a lot about it. And I'm really excited about many of the newer resources, as Kim mentioned Irene Latham's book, When the Sun Shines on Antarctica, which looks like this, has on for every page, there's one page that has the actual poem, and on the other side has the nonfiction informational text. So you're actually looking at the hybrid text right there in print for students, and I think that that's a wonderful vision and message for kids that we have to learn and understand, and this is also part of the ladder to our learning by gathering information, researching, and then being able to share that through poetry is another wonderful opportunity. So I just wanted to make sure that we shared some of those books that are new as well. There's one that's about creatures that are camouflaged. Now you see them, now you don't. And these are all on the Padlet as well. I know that when we were talking and putting together some of the resources, many of us said we want people to feel like they can leave here with some additional opportunities to take poetry back to the classroom outside of the month of April, right? If it's not enough with all the Poetry Friday anthology and the Poetry Farm, that you've got something for every day if you wanted. 365 days, right? Not just 180, because learning is really life work, and it's not just the schoolwork, but it's what's happening and how we're impacting our students to be readers, writers, and thinkers all year long. So maybe Amy can speak a little bit about the Poem Farm. I know we had a slide that had the QR code. I don't think there's anyone who's not familiar with your Poem Farm, but there you go. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Well, this is just a little site I started 6 years ago when my first book, Forest Has a Song, was taking 7 years to come out. I was a little lonely, and so I decided in Poetry Month of 2010 to write a poem every day for the month. It was fun, so I did it for a year, and now I still show up there on Fridays. Here's a poem from a few years ago when I did the dictionary hike. That was a project in which I opened my dictionary every day to a new letter, starting with A, ending with Z. It was a children's dictionary, so it was all clean and safe. And I closed my eyes, pointed to a letter, and the poem of that day was titled by that word. So here's draw. Cave mom said, "Draw on our walls." Cave boy got a bone, dipped it into mud and blood, and then he felt alone. The wall was blank. The wall was clear. He stood in place. He stared in fear. How would he fill this empty space? Cave mom looked into his face. Cave boy darling, cave boy child, draw the bison, free and wild. Draw your father. Draw a deer. Draw your life. Draw right here. He drew one tree, she drew another. They drew all morning, boy and mother. Someday we will all be gone, but art we make lives on and on. And I like to share that one with students as just a reminder that each of us has something only we can say, and writing is a great way to leave a good piece of yourself behind.
Oh, that's such a beautiful thought, and I love having the opportunity to end on a note like that. Thank you, Amy.
You mean
I don't want it to end.
instead of ending
Ending on what? You just went out, Janet. I'm sorry.
Death?
It froze a little bit. But we do have a Padlet that we shared out that has many of the resources we've already talked about, and we really hope that people will add to that. There are links to Alan's website and many of the titles that he's written, the fabulous resource of the Poem Farm, which I know the QR code was there. If you're not familiar with it, you can go in and you can find poems by craft lessons and techniques, or you can find poems by topics. So if you're really looking to enhance your poetry love collection and add to your toolbox, those are some great places. Of course, the Poetry Friday anthology, which is just a wonderful, wonderful gift to teachers and students. The celebrations, I think celebrations are so essential, and I know V.G. Routman says, you know, celebrations are not an add-on, they're a necessity, and so we need to celebrate poetry all year long, and I thank you for each and every one of you, and Kim for sharing your students with us today, and I hope the conversation continues. I hope that people will add to the Padlet and add to follow Alan or Janet or Kim and Amy, and continue the conversation and keep spreading the poetry love. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Great, thank
you.
Thank you, Joellen.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining. Stay with us. We have some great sessions coming up for our second session. So we have workshop number 6, Kristen Zemke and Katie Matara. So we're going to talk about Amplify, digital pedagogy for today and tomorrow. In workshop number 7, Rosalind Linder and Chris Howard Linder are talking about crafting details, teaching students to elaborate and add details. And then in workshop 8, we have Rusal Arabel and Molly Cura talking about re-energizing our struggling learners. And finally, in workshop number 9, Catherine Hale and Kelly Perman are going to talk about teaching, writing, and identity through series blogging. See you there. Okay, we're off.
I'm sweating.
Very cool.
I'm literally
That's crazy.
I am literally sweating.
You guys are really good. I have to apologize, the video. Apparently, I was supposed to unplug my earbuds so that everybody could hear. So I'm really sorry about that.
That's okay. We knew that was chancy to begin with, but
Yeah.
it's on Twitter, so people can.
It's on
And
Twitter.
if we put it on the Padlet too, that might be.
That's a good idea.
I'm going to do that right now. I'm tweeting out the Padlet, and I'm going to add it to the Padlet as well. So.
Okay, I just have to, I got to run because I have 2 people waiting for me in another.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So before everybody hangs